program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
I did hear that they were coming through necessary media.
Because it's necessary. Necessary media. Media, because it's necessary.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back again. I am your host and friend, Michael DeOliveira, ushering in the necessary era every Wednesday here live on Comcast Channel 95. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe there. Let me keep putting it back there. It seems to be easier for me. So, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show coming for you today. But before we get started, I think you got somebody at the door? Whoa, that's not our guest. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our guest. We got school committee member Dr. Ed Costar. I'm going to say Costar now. Ed, I think we have a little bit of a controversy over the name, though, and I know it, but I'd like for you to tell everybody out there, because I'm pretty sure.
It's Costar with a silent R, or you can say Costar. Just don't call me Costar.
Right. I mean, that's been going around, though, for a while, right?
Yeah, a long time. It's one of the things I've had to, even like during the campaign, I always started anytime I met with people.
You had to overcome that burden.
I had to explain that I'm Costar with an R, and my father had it, and I had it, and where it came from, I don't know.
Well, I know. We don't have to go through the lineage. I remember the stories of the lineage, so out of respect for that, since I did know that, I feel like let's get that out there so people can address this. But yeah, as the show goes on, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to call in with any questions or comments, because again, as I had put out there through social media, so if you're not following on Facebook, make sure you get on that, facebook.com/thenecessarymedia. If you want to call in with any questions or comments, we'll try to get that as best as possible. Number's 508-730-3222. But again, as Dr. Ed Costar is here as a school committee member, I want to get into a lot of school-related topics, because it seems like every week in here we've been talking about city budget, city money, and everybody's always like,
"Won't somebody please think of the children?" So
I'm trying to think of the children, all right, because the children are the future, Ed.
Right, I've heard that somewhere.
I've heard a couple songs. I think they throw it in. So, and as was mentioned, I don't know how many people out there know this, but we got a new, we're shopping around for a new superintendent, and was it 4 nominees?
3.
3 nominees. I thought I heard 4. So have we narrowed it down to 3, or we don't have to get into the specifics right now? But it's 3.
Yeah, it's 3.
Okay, so we got 3. This is like breaking stuff right now, so we're gonna be able to discuss this fresh. So if you're watching this, make sure you tell people, tune in. We got some fresh information coming. Okay. So like I've told you before, actually, go knock on your neighbor's door. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your husband, tell your wife, tell your kids, tell everybody. Let's go, get them on. So, all right, before we get into that, I do want to get in it quick, but just in general, Ed, I want to talk to you, and I'd like to hear, I knew you before getting on the school committee and wanting to get on with a lot of hopes of positive changes you could bring about, different philosophies maybe you wanted to try to put into play. What is it like now actually being realistically on it? You know, where has fantasy met reality, kind of a thing? What's it like for the people who just watch it and aren't in it?
My beliefs haven't changed. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten around to visit every school. Even though I knew the schools, a lot has changed since I worked in the schools. So I've visited schools, I've talked to teachers, I've tried to study hard. It's harder than I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. If you want to do a good job, you have to really study up, especially in areas you're less familiar with. For me, the budget is different than it used to be, so I have to really spend some time going to meetings and studying up on that. Kids really haven't changed, and my philosophy hasn't changed. What I find is most difficult is that some of the changes I wanted to make, or that I felt were strong, like empowering teachers, for example, making sure that we had affirming classrooms where bullying would not be tolerated, where we don't spend so much attention on tests, we spend more attention on kids. I mean, those are the things I kind of ran on.
Right.
And what I have found since I go in is that the regulations that the state puts on a school have changed a lot of the things that I would like to do.
I've tried that in conversations I've had with either people I know who have kids or even just people who just pay attention to what's going on in general and, you know, government stuff. I've tried to make this point before that I don't think many people understand when they say, well, why don't we fix this? Why don't we change this? They don't understand that there's this burden that comes down from the state, and a lot of it is usually due to funding, because then the schools are dependent on X amount of aid from the state, and the state says, okay, well, we'll give you this money dependent on you doing this. You follow this criteria. And then this criteria goes along with what you were kind of alluding to, that if you want to make changes that are personal to your area, or just even if you realize some things going on with a generation or something where you could improve on behaviors, you can't just go in there, and even if you see a clear-cut answer, you can't just go in and change things because you have red tape, you have a bunch of weight just pulling down on you. You can't just cut through it.
Right. And the state seems to be watching us very closely. When a commissioner of education comes to a school committee meeting and basically he lectured to us that he was going to watch us because the superintendent was leaving, that was not well received.
No, I can imagine.
Not by me, I'll speak for myself.
Right.
I've never seen, in all my experience, a commissioner of education come down and lecture.
Now, what is that, commissioner, as far as for the state of Massachusetts, or a federal?
Head of Mitchell Chester, the head of the DESE.
Okay.
Basically saying what a good job we've been doing, and we have to continue your progress, and we're watching you very carefully in a number of areas.
Right. Well, like I said, the eye is right. The big brother, the eye is on. So now that's what comes in. But now, and I want to touch on something again before we get to this other serious. Well, they're all serious, but before we get to the news of the day, the business of the day. A lot of the comments I hear from people most often when it comes to things they'd like fixed, one of the biggest ones is the bullying situation. To me, I think a lot of this is subjective, meaning different kids are going to have different levels of bullying. There's going to be different ways a school might approach it. I feel like this is going to be one of those, a lot of gray space in here. But what could you say for the parents out there who might be concerned with their kids? Is there any hope coming down the pipeline, or how are some strategies that are being put in place now working? What's that like for the parent out there?
We talked about that the first time we talked. That's a big issue for me because I wrote the last bullying policy we had until I left. Now the state has improved that policy. We have a policy in effect. I don't think the problem with bullying is the policy. I think the problem is interpretation of the policy. Not every act that takes place where two kids get into a fight or one kid teases another is necessarily bullying, but yet there are kids that are still being out there that are bullied, and it's legitimate. But once again, is it always on the radar of staff that has tremendous pressure being put on them to do other kinds of things, that somehow bullying, or looking for bullying, somehow becomes something that is not on their radar screens? They don't see it.
Right.
And I can tell you that bullies fly under the radar very often. They don't do it in front of their teachers. They do it in playgrounds and cafeterias, and it's devastating to the child and to the parent, but it doesn't get picked up until sometimes it's too late, and then parents and sometimes kids take it into their own hands.
Well, one of the biggest issues that comes with that, and one of the biggest frustrations I hear from parents and just people I might know, communicating with people at schools or various events and stuff, is that they've said that they've talked to some kind of personnel, someone in charge, someone in an adult power at a school situation, and they've been told something to do something. They've told their kid, do what that person said. They do this, they follow through. It's not going to get anywhere. Like you said, the bullying situation will fly under the radar. It'll continue. And then worst case scenarios, what I hear a lot, and this aggravates the heck out of me, because I'll tell you right now, with my kid, I don't think I have this to worry about, the way my kid is set up at least. But if I ever had a situation where you go to somebody in a power position at the school and you tell them what's going on with your kid, and they tell you what to do, and you don't, you do it, but it still continues to the point where it escalates, and then your child actually decides to stand up for themselves, then you find that kid ends up with the punishments that should have been placed on somebody way before. That's one of the biggest things I hear all the time, that just it cuts right into the parent.
It's when the system fails.
Right.
But there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that sometimes, no matter what policy you have in place, unless there's a consequence at the end, the bully's just going to keep doing what they're doing.
I think it's almost an impossible fight, though,
unless the parents of that bully admit it and then are on the same page and try to read the riot act to their child, what's going to happen to that child who's the bully? At some point, giving them detention or something like that, they're not going to suspend them. That's another thing where the state has come in. The state has come in and looked very carefully at our suspension rates, and basically it's discouraged people from being put out of school.
Now, question for
Whether
that.
it works or not is another debate.
Now, a question for that. You just, before I forget later, because now that's a good side subject. Clarify anything on this that I might be wrong about, but I had heard something about that they were trying to change the direction of what happens with suspensions and whatnot to do more in-school suspension.
Right.
But
That's been in existence for a while.
But my interpretation of this, so correct me if I'm wrong or maybe just educate me more on this, but my interpretation of this, what I've heard, is this is for the purpose of attendance, though. Like, this helps with the keeping a certain level of attendance
Well, I think
for the school.
It's two factors. That's one factor. Attendance is on the radar screen of every school because you're evaluated by the state according to not only your MCAS scores, but your attendance rates. So that is on the, anything they can do to improve attendance, that's one of the factors. But the other factor, too, is that the state has come down and the ACLU has come down and looked at us to make sure that we are, in fact, not disproportionately suspending more kids with disabilities or more kids of different racial or ethnic groups or ELL students. They look at that, and if anything looks the least bit out, they've actually come down and talked to the school system about that and look at that very seriously, and they're going to continue to look at that. So all of these things combined, the attendance, the fact that the state is watching it very carefully, and the fact that sometimes, you know, suspension just doesn't work,
Right.
it makes us look for other alternatives. But bullying is a very difficult nut to crack. And what you said about the student who actually takes matters into their own hands, here's the problem with that. And it's not a popular thing to say, but I've seen it happen before. Okay, and a good friend of mine had a situation that happened to this recently, where her daughter was being bullied, and finally she couldn't take it anymore. And in the playground, these two boys who had been tormenting her stood up to her. And finally, the girl could not take it anymore, and this girl, who used tremendous restraint, said to the boy in the playground, "You'd say that one more time, and I'm going to deck you."
It's necessary to clap.
I'm clapping for that one. I support that.
When the boy did say the word, whatever the word was,
Yeah.
she shoved him down. And then the other boy that bullied came to the other boy's defense, and she shoved him down too. Now, logically and rationally, a lot of people are going to say, way to go. In fact, I'll bet you that secretly some of the teachers who might have known
Right.
those boys were bullies were saying, yes! I got it. But now you have to look at it this way. When you're a principal and there's 300 kids in a playground and they don't know the history or the background and they don't know anything, all they see is one person knock down two people. There has to be a consequence for that, because otherwise the message to the 250 other kids is it's okay to take matters into your own hands and push and bully. They don't know what happened.
Right.
So that you have to almost reluctantly give some kind of consequence, and hopefully it's about the mildest consequence you can give, but you have to do that to keep order in your school, and it's hard to swallow.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you a story, true story. This was a kid at Durfee. When I worked at Durfee, he was one of the top students. Mild-mannered, top 10 kid. He was being bullied unmercifully. He was a freshman by another kid because they teased him. He was kind of an intellectual kid.
Okay.
And he finally, at one point, could not take it anymore, and he punched the kid out. The vice principal, who knew this boy very well, brought him into his office, and he did it in front of other kids. And the vice principal said, "You know, I have to suspend you for 1 day because the rule is you can't take violence into your own hands, even though we haven't been able to stop it." And the vice principal said to him, "But between you and me,
Yeah.
good for you."
Right.
But you know I have to do it.
Yeah.
The boy said, I knew it when I did it.
Yeah.
I took it. That child, who's not a child anymore, he finished valedictorian of his class. The bully never touched him again. I'm not saying you should always take matters into your own hands. We should have better ways to handle it. But I can't criticize a school that imposes a punishment because you have to do something that's safe for the entire school. You just want to be reasonable about it. You don't want
Right.
to take the hammer down on somebody that does that.
Well, I just want to get it out there because, like I said, a lot of the times when I talk to people, or a lot of the concerns that end up being put in front of me when it comes to children in the public schools is the bullying is one of the biggest ones that I hear about. I mean, we're going to have the classics or the baselines. Actually, you know what? Before I even get to that, we got to call you, right?
Yeah.
Call? All right. Hey, caller, you there? Caller?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
How you
How do
doing?
you feel about the kids taking MCAS?
Say that again?
How do you feel about the kids taking MCAS?
Well, you're talking to somebody that basically feels that we spend too much attention on MCAS and not enough attention on what the kids really, really need. I believe that we need to empower teachers to teach the kids based on what they need and what their interests are, and that if we allow them that freedom, I think that sometimes we become obsessed with MCAS. And the school committee recently voted, unanimously I might add, and I'm proud to be part of that vote, in favor of a House bill called House Bill 340, which wants to put a 5-year moratorium on MCAS so that it will not count toward, it will no longer be a high-stakes test. Because we need to reevaluate that, have we gone overboard? I think the pendulum has swung far too much toward MCAS, and that's my opinion.
Is that good for you, Carl? You got anything else?
Is that your experience?
I have one more question.
Go right
Okay.
ahead.
Do you think we should have February vacation?
Do I think you should have February vacation? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you?
Yeah.
Of course. Then we agree. February. I know there have been people who have said, yes, February vacation, you know, why have February vacation? Well, there's a lot of reasons. I think kids need February vacation. I think we
Okay,
say
bye.
bye.
All right, thanks. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I've had good calls on the other end of the spectrum. I think I just had probably my youngest caller. I'll take
There you
it. That
go.
was good. So, kind of tossed me for that one though. I was just gonna say.
Anyway, let me just say this.
Yeah.
I hate bullying.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my career trying to keep kids from bullying other kids. And when I see it, I'm trying to stop it. And it's high on my radar screen, but it is still a difficult thing to crack. We have to put it on the radar of teachers. And we do have, I don't think it's the policies. I think the issue is that when the parents, the teachers, and the schools and the kids all together consider that to be as important as MCAS, we're going to be okay.
Well, I just wanted, like I said, this is what now I remember my train of thought where I was going with this. What I wanted to say was, I wanted to put this out there because, again, when I talk to the parents or different people, when I bring up school stuff, it just seems, you know, forget the stuff that would actually trickle down to books or supplies and things like that. The things they're dealing with, or at least what makes them want to speak out, is because it's hitting these certain people the hardest, is when they're dealing with a bullying situation, or we have like a special needs situation, special learning situation. There's a lot of people get frustrated with that.
That's how come I ran for school committee.
Right. Well, again, these are all the things I know you were
Yep.
going in there with, but then when you get in there
Well,
and it's
let me
like
say
red
this,
tape.
okay?
Red tape
One of the
everywhere.
first things I also believed in is I'm a big believer in free speech. I thought that the citizen input policy was kind of repressive. It would not allow parents and school committee people to talk in front of the school committee during citizen input unless what they wanted to say was related to the agenda, and I thought that restricted them. So
Definitely.
yeah, well, I could not get that changed, but what I did do was I was able to create, with the blessing of the mayor and the rest of the school committee, a subcommittee that we put together.
hear out.
It's called Parent and Community Outreach. I chair the subcommittee with 2 other subcommittee people. The purpose of the subcommittee is to allow parents with any kind of issues at all, whether they want to talk about or they have ideas about the school system or things they'd like to see the school system do more, they bring it to our subcommittee, and it's basically across the table to give them more input than they would have had if they had citizen
Now,
input.
when and
let me just
where
say,
does this?
We had our first meeting April 7th. Usually it was hard to kind of get everybody together. It was a difficult time. And at our first meeting, we had a parent that basically wanted to talk about recess. She felt that recess was not being applied equitably around the schools, that some schools we had 4 parents at 4 different schools, and that was important to them. Now, maybe that's not important to like some people, but to those parents it was important. They thought their little kids needed recess. And as a result of that, we basically put together a survey, and the school committee approved it. And now the superintendent has been instructed to survey principals to find out what we're doing, because some are using recess as punishment, which is against school policy. Some principals were having 1 recess, some were having 2 recesses.
Oh, when you say using recess as punishment, you mean by withholding it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
And the policy forbids that.
Right.
And there were schools that some parents reported to us where some principals were saying if 2 kids would act up, the whole class would lose recess.
Yeah.
And they felt that their young kids especially needed recess. And the research
I'm in that boat.
And the research says that kids actually benefit from recess. So that was a case where parents brought something to that committee, and that's why we put that committee together. So parents will have a place that they can at least come to where they can actually discuss their grievances.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And then we'll go from that to the school committee. That's what
I've
we
brought up trying to do the same thing for the city council when eventually it seems as though some of the city council has gotten, I know this has nothing to do with you, but just for everybody out there listening, I brought this up because it seems there's a point where some of the city council was getting frustrated at just, you know, people wanting to come down there and voice their frustration or whatever. Well, where else? You know what I mean? They don't have another forum.
Right.
So for you to do that, like I was trying to tap on my ear for people to listen. I don't know how many people out there might have known this, but the school committee, if you want, like Ed was saying, if you wanted to go and speak, it was forget it. You know, you had so many hoops to jump through, and then you had to be lucky if that was the day you were even allowed to jump through those hoops.
right.
So that's awesome, Ed. But I only got about really 10 minutes in the show, and I got 8 minutes really to go with this stuff.
Goes
so
by quick.
It does, I know. Again, I've told people, I used to have a 2-hour show, now it's a half-hour. It's a lot of stuff to cram in. But all right, so let's get to some of the meat and potatoes here.
Okay.
So I want to go over something real quick since we just went through in the city council area, we're going through the budget stuff. Before we get to the superintendent situation, the budget situation, I know when I've said so many times, I try to follow along. I can follow the city council meetings, but when I try to follow a school committee meeting, it's so dry to me. I support you and anybody else who can stick it out because I can't. I've tried. But when I did catch, I know one of the big things was to try to come to a resolution for the budget. It was, you kept saying over and over again, to cram people into a room and iron it out.
Right.
Is that what happened? You guys finally jammed everyone into a room?
Ultimately, that's what happened. But
Yeah.
it was a lot of work before you got to that. It started with the superintendent basically saying we want level services and it's going to cost $8 million more than last year.
Yep.
That's where it started. And then some people on the school committee, and I was one of them, said, well, you're not even going to look at, what does that mean? I mean, like, they had subcommittees to look at finance, and every principal came there and said, we need everything. We need every penny. We need all that $8 million.
Right, they're gonna
And
take
it went to the
whatever they can
school
get.
committee, and the mayor basically said that's undoable. And then Joe Martin, and I backed him up, and so did the rest, said, no, we need to look at possible cuts. So we instructed the superintendent to bring her people together. She brought together principals, and basically principals came up with 3% and 5% cuts. They presented them to a finance subcommittee, and that finance subcommittee, after listening to principals, put together cuts that amounted to $3.7 million. We approved that. The mayor looked at that and basically said that's not enough. So now the mayor had some other things that he wanted to cut, and of course the superintendent and some of the people on the school committee disagreed with that, and that was where I said, when I heard them arguing, why don't you just get into a room,
Yeah.
work it out,
Yeah.
and then sign, I think I said, excuse me,
No, there
sign
was
it in blood, and then bring it to us, and we'll approve it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the mayor and the superintendent got together, and they
epiphany
each
happened.
gave it a little bit.
Yeah.
They found other areas in the budget that they could take some money, and they expanded those cuts to, I think, about 5.4 million total. So it's not 8 million, and it's not, it's
Again,
not
the problem
nothing.
is with the time with the show, because I
That's
know
what
two main points that I wanted to get
Okay.
into that, but I'm so run out of time. But one of the, I know part of this, I would assume this, what you want to call a solution to that, or the way the epiphany comes from, is had to do with the insurance, right? That was maneuvering the insurance.
Right. Because
Which
that was the first thing when I came to the school committee, that was the first thing that hit me, is the whole idea of who's going to handle health insurance, and why was the school doing it when the city used to do it successfully?
Okay, so that was in the school's budget.
Yes.
Okay, so for people out there listening, again, part of the juggling was going on was taking now that the insurance that was going toward the school is now being put into the city.
And it always had been in the city.
Right.
And then it went to the school for a year, and now it's back in the city.
Okay, side thing to that now, that with the city now, city council, as I've said before on this show, and I'm a fan of this, it's the best thing we've had so far, with the city, with the mayor proposing the budget using zero-based budgeting. I know he's advocated for this school committee to do the same. What's going on with that? Why was there some, hesitation to that, and what's the conversation like about that going forward?
Well, I'm new to this, but I can tell you for the last 7 years, they've had a certain way that they've done it, and they pretty much
Well, so
gotten
did
whatever
the
they
city.
wanted to get.
This is what the
So
city did.
This was the first time that I've seen where there was some discord, and on the school committee, people came up and objected. And they
I
were
think there's a
upset.
lot of discord. Again,
Yeah.
we have a new superintendent
Right.
coming. I don't think that
Okay,
was
so
for no
the
reason.
zero-based budgeting, or how we're going to budget in the future, it's going to depend a lot on the next superintendent. And I suspect that it's not going to be the same way we've always done it.
Ladies and gentlemen, segue, because that was the perfect point. Now let's go into that. We got about, I'll say 4 minutes. I can really hammer this now.
Okay.
Explain to everybody what's going on. We were shopping around for a new superintendent.
Yep.
So what exactly was taking place? You said you're on the board?
Yes. Okay. Here's what, I'll cut it as
Take it
quickly as
away,
I
because
can.
this is
All
way
right,
out of
here
my
it is.
wheelhouse.
We hired a consultant, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, that is very well versed in hiring superintendents across the state. We hired them as a consultant. They advertised. We put together a superintendent search committee. 19 people applied for the job. The search committee, which is 14 people, consists of teachers, administrators, some school committee, business people, higher ed people, parents, very
Strictly
broad-
Fall River or outside?
Strictly Fall River.
Okay.
Okay, well, some of them, they work in Fall River. We might have somebody who lives across the
Right.
river, but works at BCC.
Yep.
All right, so, but that, we culled the 19 down to 10 that we interviewed. We interviewed 5 nights. The interviews for each person was from 90 minutes to 2 hours long, so they were long nights. We came up with 19 very hard questions that covered all the areas that we considered to be important. We spent all that time doing it. After we interviewed 10 people, and we had all their resumes provided to us by the consultant, references provided to us by the consultant. We had all that information together, and then after the last interview, we basically sat down and we all voted on who were the top 3 for each of us.
All right.
And then from that,
can we get
came up
names
with the
out of
3.
this?
Yeah.
Go. This is all you.
All right, these 3 individuals now will be interviewed by the school committee as a whole tomorrow evening. That's how hot this is. We have Charles Granson, who was a deputy superintendent in Poughkeepsie, New York, and he works right now as a director in the Harvard Kennedy School of Leadership in Boston. We have a man by the name of Stacy Scott, who right now is the superintendent of schools in Framingham, and a man by the name of Matt Malone, who was the former Secretary of Education in the state of Massachusetts. They all have their doctorates, 1 from Harvard, 2 from Boston College.
Okay.
And that's the short of it.
Right.
Now we are vetting them.
Yeah.
We will make site visits. They're going to come down and visit some of our schools tomorrow, and they will be interviewed by the school committee as a whole.
I'm a little, you made my ears perk up when you said we got someone who's currently a superintendent in Framingham.
Yes.
Who's shopping to come to Fall River as a superintendent.
Yes.
I have question marks bubbling all around me. I don't
Well,
understand.
Because contracts get up and people move. When you're in that room and you're looking at 10 people or 19 people,
Yeah.
there are 2 kinds of applicants that we look at. I likened it to be like in an NFL draft room. You're looking at people. Yeah, exactly. You're looking at people like, are we going to trade the pick or are we going to keep the pick?
Yeah.
You're looking at people who are up and comers who might be the next superstar, but they have not been superintendents yet, but they have an unbelievable resume.
Well, I can understand those other people.
And
So
you have other people who are
I see
finishing
where you're
out
going
their
with this.
contract.
I see where you're going
but
with this.
they made the All-Star team
Right,
perhaps,
right.
but they're finishing out their
Right.
contract and now they're ready to move on.
I got you. You know what, Ed? That was a good
And that's
analogy.
what it's
now.
like,
Good
and that's what it
analogy.
felt like.
I got you. We got like the. No, I got you now. The MVPs of the previous year or whatever, they got a big contract year coming up. I got you now. Good, Dad. I like that. That was good. All right. Well, is there anything out of these 3 people that you think people should be keying on as the next couple days go on?
Well, I think that you need to
What
watch.
are some of the hot points you guys are going to have to be narrowing it down more on?
Well, I think you have to watch the interviews tomorrow because the interviews, it's going to be a brand new set of questions. The questions, like everybody had questions that were important to them. Okay, my questions were different than the questions of the principal of the high school. My questions had to do with leadership, communication style. For me, I want somebody who's transparent. I want someone who's a leader. I want somebody that Fall River can look up to. I want someone who is inclusive, listens, collaborates, is not dictatorial, cares a lot about the kids, knows about special ed, knows about ELL kids, and really has a grasp of that. Those are the things that were important to me.
So this is tomorrow.
Tomorrow evening.
Tomorrow 6?
At BCC. 5 o'clock.
5
the first
o'clock.
interviews, 3 of them. 90 minutes each.
Yeah.
5, 6:30, 6:30, 9. 6:30, 7:30, 8.
All right, well, again, this show goes quick. So, ladies and gentlemen, right now I'm going to be at the end of the show. Right now we're going to the fan favorite No Flex Zone Award of the Week.
No flex zone. No flex zone. They know better. They know better.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, you are in the No Flex Zone. The No Flex Zone is a zone where you do not belong flexing. And by flexing, I mean doing anything you're not supposed to be doing in a place you're not supposed to be doing it. And this week's, folks, comes off of a tragedy, but the tragedy isn't the focus. The tragedy being the shooting that happened at the nightclub in Orlando, Florida. But the No Flex Zone Award winner goes to anybody who chose to politicize that event within minutes of it happening. As soon as the news went up, we had people already just jamming on the political end of it, either pro-gun, anti-gun. This is now a terrorism issue. This is now a hate crime issue. Just leave it alone. Leave it alone for a little bit, all right? Let the stuff simmer down. Let the people grieve, all right? No need. Remember that for the next time it happens, okay? So that's going to be it. I want to thank Dr. Ed Costar for coming out today. That's going to be the show, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure to come back next week. Thank you. See you. And thanks, Ed, again.
Thank you.